One of the earliest and most fundamental aspects of contact between two cultures is trade, either information or goods and services. Sometimes, however, one party may be rather surprised at what the other party values. All the Universe in a Mason Jar by Joel Haldeman. Read by Karl. New Homestead, Florida, 1990. John Taylor Taylor, retired professor of mathematics, lived just over 2 kilometers out of town in a 3-room efficiency module tucked in an isolated corner of a citrus grove. Books and old furniture and no neighbors, which is the way John liked it. He only had a few years left on this earth, and preferred to spend it with his oldest and most valued friend, himself. But this story isn't about John Taylor Taylor. It's about his moonshiner, Lester Gilbert, and some 5 billion others. This day the weather was fine, so the professor took his stick and walked into town to pick up the week's mail. A thick cylinder of journals and letters was wedged into his box. He had asked the clerk to remove them from the other side. He took the mail under his arm without looking at it and wandered next door to the bar. "Howdy, Professor." "Good afternoon, Leroy." He and the bartender were the only ones in the place. Not unusual this late in the month. "I'll take a Boilermaker today, thanks." He threaded his way through a maze of 5 paper strips and eased himself into a booth of chipped, weathered plastic. He sorted his mail into 4 pillars: junk, bills, letters, and journals. Quite a bit of junk, 2 bills, a letter turned out to be another bill, and 3 journals: Nature, Communications to the American Society of Mathematics, and a collection of papers delivered at an ASM symposium on topology. He scanned the contributors' lists and, as usual, saw none of his old colleagues represented. "Here you go." Leroy set a cold bar and a shot glass of whiskey between communication and the phone bill. John paid him with a 5 and lit his pipe carefully before taking a sip. He folded Nature back to the letter skull and began reading. The screen door slapped shut loudly behind a burly man in wrinkled, clean work clothes. John recognized him with a nod. He returned a left-handed V sign and mounted a bar stool. "How about a red eye, Leroy? Mixture of beer and tomato juice with a dash of Louisiana hangover cure." Leroy mixed it. "Rough night, Isaac?" "Phew, you don't know." He downed half the concoction in a gulp and shuddered. He turned to John. "Hey, Professor, what do you know about them flying saucers?" "Lots of them around a few years ago," he said tactfully. "Never saw one myself." "Me neither. Wouldn't give you a nickel for one, not until last night." He sipped the red eye and wiped his mouth. "What?" bartender said. "You saw one?" "Saw one? Phew." He slid the 2/3 empty glass across the bar. "You wanted to put some beer on top of that?" "Thanks." "We was down the country road 7-8 clicks. You know Eric Olson's new place?" "Don't think so." "New boy. Took over Jarman's plat." "Oh yeah. Never comes in here. Know of him now. You wouldn't hang around no bar and if you had a pretty little... Well, point is, he was putting on one of the new stasis barns, you know." "Yeah, no bugs. Keep stuff forever," my daddy-in-law said. "Well, he picked one big enough for his whole avocado crop. Hold on till the prices right up north, like January. No profit till next year. Help his amortization." "Yeah, but what's that got to do with the flying?" "I'm getting to it." John settled back to listen. Some tall tale was on the way. "Anyway, we was going to have an old-fashioned barn raising. Ms. Olson got a boar and set up a pit barbecue. The other ladies, they bought the trimmings. Eric, he made 2 big wash tubs of spiced wine, set them on ice until we get the barn up. 5-6 hours it turned out. The directions wasn't right. Whole afternoon, we just headed for that wine like you never saw. Guess we was all pretty loaded. Finished off that wine before the pig was ready. Eric, he called in the Sampsons and had him send out 2 kegs of bud." "Got to get to know that boy," Leroy said. "Tell me about it." "Well, we turned to that pig and had him down to bones and gristle in 20 minutes. Best goddamn pig I ever had, anyhow. So as not to let the fire permit go to waste, we went out and rounded up a bunch of scrap, a couple of good-sized logs. Finished off that beer around a bonfire. Tom Harker went up to pick up his fiddle, and he took along Midnight Jackson to pick up his banjo. Miss Olsen had this Swedish guitar. Wasn't too many strings, but by God, she could play it. We cracked that second keg about sundown, and Lester Gilbert, you know Lester?" Leroy laughed. "Don't I just?" "He was afraid the beer wouldn't hold out. Went to get some corn." John made a mental note to be home by 4 o'clock. It was Wednesday. Nero would be by with his weekly quart. We get along all right, the bartender was saying. Figured our clientele don't overlap that much. Phew, Isaac said. Some of Wester's clientele overlaps on a regular basis. Anyway, I got there quick. You know how clear it was last night. Say, let me have another, just beer. Leroy filled the glass and cut the foam off. Clear enough to see flying saucer, eh? I'm getting to it, thanks. He sipped it, concentrated for a few seconds on tapping tobacco into cigarette paper. Like I say, it got dark fast. We were sitting around the fire, singing if we knew the words, drinking if we didn't. Expect you don't know many of the words yourself. Never could keep the words in my head. Anyway, the fire was getting a mite hot on me, so I turned this deck chair around and settled down looking east, fire to my back, watching the moon rise over the government forest there. Hold on now, moon ain't coming up until after midnight. You going damn right it ain't. John felt the chill even though he'd seen it coming. Isaac had a certain fame as a storyteller. That wasn't nobody's moon. Did anybody else see it? John asked. Everybody. Everybody who was there. The one that wasn't. I'll get to that. I saw that thing and spilled my beer getting up. Damn near tripped and fell in the pit. Howard, look at that goddamn thing. And pointed, shining up and down, and like I said, they all did see it. It's a little bigger than the moon and not quite so round, egg-shaped. Wider than the moon. If you look close, you can see little green and blue flashes around the edge. Didn't make no noise we could hear. It was moving real slow. We saw it for at least a minute. Then it went down behind the trees. What could it have been? The bartender said. Sure you wasn't all drunk and seeing things? No way in hell. You know me, Leroy. I can tie one on every now and again, but I just don't plain get that drunk. Sure thing I don't get that drunk on beer and wine. And Lester wasn't back with the shine yet? Nope, that's the other part of the story. Isaac took his time lighting a cigarette and drank some more beer. I'm here to tell you, we was all feeling sort of spooky over that. Hunking up around the fire, looking over our shoulders. Eric went to call the sheriff, but he didn't get no answer. Sat there for a long time, speculating. Forgot all about Lester, supposed to be back with the corn. Suddenly we hear this something crashing through the woods. Tommy sprints to his pickup and gets out his over and under. But it's just Lester, running like the hounds of hell, is right behind him. He's got a plywood box with a half dozen mason jars in it. From 10 feet away, it smells like Saturday night. He don't say a word, sets that box down, not so gentle. Jumps over to Johnny and grabs that gun away from him, receives it in the government woods and pulls those triggers. Just boom, crack. 20-gauge buckshot and a 30 caliber rifle slug right behind. Now, Tommy is understandable pissed off. He takes the gun back from Lester and shoves him on the shoulder, follows him and shoves him again, all the time asking him, just not too politely, don't you know he's too drunk to handle a firearm? Don't you know we could all get busted just shooting in the federal land? And just in general, what the Sam hell's going on, Lester? He paused to relight the cigarette and took a drink. Now Lester's just taking it and not saying a thing. How about that? Peculiar, Leroy admitted. Isaac nodded. Lester is a good boy, but he does have one hell of a temper. Anyway, Lester finally sits down by his box and unscrews the top off a full jar. It's one with no top, it looks to be empty. It just gulps down one whole hell of a lot. He coughs once and starts talking. Surprised he could talk at all, John agreed. He always mixed Lester's corn with a lot of something else. And listen, that boy is sober like a parson. And he says, talking real low and steady, that he's saying the same thing we did. He describes it just exactly like I told you. But he sees it on the ground, not in the air. Isaac passed the glass over and Leroy filled it without a word. He was taking a long cut through the government land so as to stay away from the road. Anyway, he had a call of nature and always felt more satisfying on government land. He stopped to take care of that and have a little drink and suddenly saw this light, which was a saucer dropping down in the clearing, but he didn't know that. We figured it was the sheriff's copter with nightlands on, which didn't bother him much, because the sheriff's one of his best customers. Matter of fact, don't went on, I told you. Anyway, he thought the sheriff might want a little something, so we walks on towards the light. It's on the outside of a little rise, no underbrush, but it takes a few minutes to get there. Tops the rise and there's this saucer, bigger than a private copter, he says. He's stupefied. Takes a drink and studies it for a while. Thinks it's probably some secret government thing. He's leaning against a tree, studying, and it dawns on him he ain't alone. Isaac blew the end of his cigarette and shook his head. I expect you ain't gonna believe this. Not sure I do myself. But I can't help that, straight from Lester's mouth. Here's something on the other side of the tree where he's leaning. Peeks him on the tree and there's this thing. Says it's got big eyes like a big cat, like a lion's, only bigger. It's a lot of big animal otherwise, about the size of a lion but no fur. Just wrinkled hide like a rhino. It's got big shiny claws it's using on the tree and a mouthful of big teeth, which is displays at Lester and growls. Now Lester, you got nothing for a weapon but a quart of Dade County's finest. So he splashes that at the monster's face, hoping to blind it, and takes off like a bat. He gets back to his box of booze and stops for a moment and looks back. You can see the critter against the light from the saucer. It's on its hind legs, weaving back and forth with its paws out, just roaring. Looks like the booze works, so Leroy picks up the box, ammunition. But just then the saucer light goes out. Lester knows good and goddamn well that damn thing can see in the dark with them big eyes. But Lester can see her gun bonfire. Quick or so, West, so he starts running, holding on to that box of corn for dear life. So he comes in Eric's land and grabs the gun, and all that happens. We pass the corner around a while and wash it down with good cold beer. Finally, we get up enough courage to go after the thing. We got a bunch of flashlights, but the only guns were Johnny's over and under, and a pair of antique flintlock pistols that Eric got from his dad. Eric loaded them and gave one to me, one to Midnight. Midnight, he was a soldier in the war, you know. He was going to lead us. Eric himself didn't think he could shoot an animal. Dirt farmer. Good boy, though. So again, couldn't get the sheriff? What about the guard? Well, no. Truth to tell, everybody, even Lester, was half convinced we ain't seen nothing real. Eric had got to tell us what went on to that punch. Pretty weird. And the general theory was that he whipped a bunch of how the hallucinogen John supplied. That's right, like that window pane the old folks take. No offense, Professor. Never touched this stuff. Anyway, we figured that was probably seeing things. We go out and check, just in case. Got a bunch of kitchen knives and farm tools. Took the ladies along, too. Got Midnight and Lester up in the front, the rest of us straggling along behind, and we followed Lester's tail back to where he'd seen the thing. Lester took a long drink and was silent for a moment, brow burrowed in thought. Well, hell, he took us straight up to that tree from a blind man if there weren't big old gouges all along the back. And the place did smell like Lester's corn. Midnight, he shined a light down to where Lester said the saucer was, and sure enough, the brush was all flat there. Walked down to take a closer look. All of us getting a little jumpy now. And goddamn if you'd been bumped right into it. The saucer was there, but you flat couldn't see it. He let up one hell of a yelp and fired the little flintlock down at it point blank. Bounced off, you could hear the ball sing away. Came back up the rise just like a cat on fire. When he was clear, I took a pot shot at the damn thing, and then Johnny, he shot it 4 or 6 times. It was the kind of wind that it was gone. It was a long silence. You ain't bullshitting me, Joey said. This ain't no story. No, John said. The big man was pale under his heavy tan. This ain't no story. Let me fix you a stiff one. No, I gotta say straight. I got some newspaper reports coming down this afternoon. And how's your coffee today? Clean the pot. John stayed for one more beer and then started walking home. It was hot, and he stopped halfway to rest under a big willow, reading a few of the nature articles. The one on the Cirrus probe was fascinating. He reread it as he ambled the rest of the way home. So his mind was a couple of 100 million miles away when he walked up the path to his door and saw it was slightly ajar. First it startled him. He remembered it was Lester's delivery day. He always left the place unlocked. They were ridge runners, but they weren't interested in old books. And the moonshadow probably just left his wares inside. He checked his watch as he walked through the door. It was not quite 3. Funny, Lester was usually late. No mason jar in sight. From his library, a snuffling noise. This year before, some kind of animal, the sheriff said it was probably a bear, got into his house and made a shambles of it. He used to open the end table drawer and took out the Walther P-38 he'd taken from a dead German officer half a century before. As he edged towards the library, the thought occurred to him that 50-year-old ammunition might not fire. It was about the size of a bear. A big bear. The skin was pebbly gray with tufts of bristle. There were 2 arms, 2 legs, and a stiff tail to bounce back on. The tail had a serrated edge on top that looked razor sharp. The feet and hands terminated in pointed black claws. The head was vaguely saurian, too many teeth and too large. As he watched, the creature tore a page out of Fidechev's computational methods of linear algebra, stuffed in his mouth and chewed, spat it out. Turned to see John standing at the door. His probably safe to say that any other resident of the new homestead, faced with a situation, would either have started blazing at the apparition or would have fainted. But John Taylor was nothing if not a cold and rational man, and had besides suffered a lifelong addiction to fantastic literature. So he measured what was left of his life against this possibility this fearsome monster might be intelligent and humane. He laid the gun on a writing desk and presented empty hands to the creature, palms out. The thing regarded him for a minute. It opened its mouth, teeth beyond counting, and closed it. Translucent eyelids nictated over huge yellow eyes and slid back. Then it replaced the book and duplicated John's gesture. In several of the stories that John had read, humans had communicated with alien races through the medium of mathematics, a pure and supposedly universal language. Fortunately, his library supported a blackboard. "Allow me to demonstrate," he said with a slightly quavering voice as he crossed the board, "the theorem of Pythagoras." The creature's eyes followed him, blinking. "A logical starting place, perhaps, as good as any." He trailed off apologetically. He drew a right triangle on the board, then drew squares out from the sides that embraced a right angle. He held the chalk out to the alien. The creature made a huffing noise, vaguely affirmative, and shambled over to the blackboard. It retracted claws in one hand and took the chalk from John. He bit one end of the chalk experimentally and spit it out. Then it reached over and casually sketched in the box, representing the square of the hypotenuse. In the middle of the triangle was obviously an equal sign. John was ecstatic. He took the chalk from the alien and repeated the curly line. He pointed the island at himself. "Equals." The alien nodded enthusiastically and took the chalk. It put a slanted line through John's equal sign. "Not equals." He stared at the blackboard, tapping it with the chalk, one universal gesture. Then, squeaking with every line, it rapidly wrote down 1 ... 1 1 dash 1 1 dash dash 111. John studied the message. Some sort of tree diagram? Perhaps a counting system. Or maybe not mathematical at all. He shrugged at the creature. It went to sled motion and back to white growling. No. John held his palms out again. "Friends." The alien shuffled slowly back to the blackboard and pointed to what had just written down. Then it opened its terrible mouth and pointed at that. It repeated the pair of gestures twice. "Oh," eating the book and the chalk. "Are you hungry?" He repeated the action more emphatically. John motioned for it to follow him and walked towards the kitchen. The alien wallowed slowly, its tail a swaying counterweight. The refrigerator took out a cabbage, a packet of catfish, an avocado, some cheese, an egg, and a chafing dish of leftover green beans, slightly dried out. He laid them on the counter and demonstrated they were food by elaborately eating a piece of cheese. The alien sniffed at each item. When he got to the egg, it stared at John for a long time. He tasted the green bean and spat it out. Walked around the kitchen in a circle, then stopped and growled a couple of times. He sighed and walked in the living room. John followed. It went out the front door, walked around behind the module, sighed again, and disappeared from the feet up. John noted this is where the creature had disappeared. The grass was crushed in a large circle. This was consistent with Isaac's testimony, in an invisible flying saucer. The alien came back with a Garrus medallion around his neck. Looked like it was made of rhinestones and bright magenta plastic. It growled, and her voice whispered inside his brain. Hello, can you hear me?" Yes, I can hear you." "Very well. This will cause trouble," it sighed. "One is not to use a translator with a Class 6 culture except on the most dire emergency. But I am starved. Do not eat soon, the fires inside me will go out. I'll have to fill out many forms, may they reek." "Well, anything I can do to help?" "Yes." I walked by him, back towards the front door. "A simple chemical is the basis for all my food. I have diagrammed it." He followed the alien back to the library. "This is hard." He studied his diagram. "The translator is hard outside of basic words. This top mark is the number 1. It means a gas that burns in air. Hydrogen? Perhaps. Yes, I think. Third mark is the number 8, which means a black rock that also burns but harder. The mark between means that a very small they are joined together. A hydrogen-carbon bond? This is only noise to me. Faint sound of a car door slamming out on the dirt road. "Uh-oh," John said. "Company calling. You wait here." He opened the door a crack and watched Lester stroll up the path. Hey, Professor, you ain't gonna believe what... I know, Les. Isaac told me about it down at Leroy's. He had the door open about 12 centimeters. Lester stood on the doormat, trying to look inside. Something going on in there? Hard to explain. I've got company. Lester closed his mouth and gave John a broad wink. Know you had it in you, Doc. It passed the mason jar to John. Look, I'll come back later. Really do want your opinion. Fine, we'll do that. I'll fix you a taloned hand snatched the mason jar from John. Lester turned white and staggered back. Don't move a muscle, Doc. I'll get my gun. No, wait, it's friendly. Food? The creature growled. Yes, friend. The screw top was unfamiliar, but only presented a momentary difficulty. The alien snapped it off, glass and all, with a flick of the wrist. It dashed the cord of raw shine down its throat. Ah, fine, so good. 3 parts food, 1 part water. Strange flavor, so good. He pushed John aside and waddled out the door. You have mere good food? Lester backed away. You talking to me? Yes. You have more of what your mind calls corn? I've been damned. Lester shook his head in wonder. You are the ugliest son of a bitch I ever did see. This is humor, yes. In my world, egg-eater, you would be in cage. To frighten children with their amusement. It looked left and right and pointed at Lester's beat-up old Pinto station wagon. More corn than that animal? Sure, squealed the creature. You got something to pay with? Pay? What is this noise? Lester looked at John. Did he say what I thought he said? John laughed. I got my checkbook. You're going to have only once. When John came back out, Lester was leaning on his station wagon, sipping from a jar, talking to the alien. The creature was resting back on its tail, consuming food at a rate of about a quart every 30 seconds. Lester showed how to unscrew the jars. I do not lie, it said. This is the best food I've ever tasted. Lester beamed. That's what I tell everybody. You can't get that in no store. I tasted only a little last night, but could tell from even that. Have been seeking you. It was obvious that the alien was going to drink all the 3 cases, $25 per jar, not calculated, 30 jars. Les, I'm going to have to owe you part of the money. That's okay, Doc. He just tickles the hell out of me. The alien paused in mid-jar. Now I am to understand, I think. You own this food. The Doc gives to you a rating of equal value. That's right, John said. You, the less, think of things you value. It must be symmetry. I must have a thing you value. Lester's face wrinkled up in thought. Ah, there was one thing. Yes, I go. The alien waddled back to his ship. Gad, Lester said, if this don't beat all. Traveling with the alien is his pet, Treblig. He carries it because it always emanates happiness. It's also a radioactive creature that can excrete into any element. The alien gives it a telepathic command. With an effort that scrambles television perception for 50 miles, it produces a gold nugget weighing slightly less than 1 kilo. The alien came back and handed the nugget off to Lester. I would take some of your corn back to my homeworld, yes? Is this sufficient? The alien had to wait a few days while Lester brewed up enough shine to fill up his auxiliary food tanks. He declined an invitation to go to Washington, but didn't mind talking to reporters. Humankind, to learn the universe, was teeming with intelligent life. In this part of the galaxy, there was an organization called the Commonality. Not really government, more like a club. Club members are given such useful tools as faster than light travel and immortality. All races were invited to join the Commonality once they evolved morally above a certain level. Mankind, of course, was only a class 6. Certain individuals were as high as 5 or as low as 7, equivalent to the moral state of an inanimate object, but it was the average that counted. After a rather grim period of transition, the denizens of Earth settled down to concentrating on being good, trying to reach class 3, the magic level. It would take surprisingly few generations, because humankind had a constant reminder of the heaven and earth that awaited them, as ship after ship drifted down from the sky to settle by a still outside a little farm near New Homestead, Florida. For several races, the gourmet center of Sirius Sector. The end.